it's almost impossible to be reading and caring about technology and its impact on the world around us and have not read Douglas Rushkoff. He's a prolific writer, a wonderful thinker, and he's here today to challenge some of our assumptions about what media is and what it could be. So with that, take it away, Douglas.
Yeah, just a little bit about me. I mean, I was around for the very early internet. I was the guy who wrote, I wrote a book called Cyberia, Cyberia, which is kind of the first book on cyber culture for Bantam Doubleday Dell. And they canceled the book in 1992 because they thought the internet would be over by 93 when the book was supposed to come out. So that's been sort of the nature of my career is writing things and then having people go, what, you really think we're going to be using email someday? Or so, yeah, I wrote a column for the New York Times about internet and the web. It was in the Guardian of London. I wrote a whole bunch of books. One of them was called Media Virus, which kind of coined the idea of viral media. Then I got more concerned about the way kind of business was coming into the net and changing things. I wrote a book called Life Inc., something called Team Human, Present Shock, Program or Be Programmed. I mean, the one that's most relevant here is a book I did in like 95, this book, Playing the Future, which later got called Screenagers, where I was arguing, again, controversially at the time, that the kids are okay. The kids are going to be all right as long as they understand how these technologies work. They are the natives here and we are the immigrants. I called them digital natives, saying that they're going to learn the language better than we adults. And there's other things maybe that we need to be looking out for. I did some frontline documentaries. One was called The Merchants of Cool, about MTV kind of taking over youth culture. Then I did one a few years ago called Generation Like for PBS, really about Instagram and Facebook and how that was, those corporations were trying to dominate youth culture. But I've had, I guess, both hopes and concerns about interactive media since the beginning. My hopes were that really simple things, from the television remote control to the Nintendo joystick to the computer mouse, would change our relationship to media, from a read-only media that you can look at to a read-write media that you could actually make. And I've always been excited about that, but I've also been concerned about the susceptibility of interactive media to marketers, to fascists, to Elon Musk characters to help make us all crazy. In short, I think what we need to be able to do is distinguish between technology and business. The tech is one thing, and interactive technologies and computer mice and programs and blockchains and all, they do have certain biases, but they're one thing that I think in many ways that young people are, because they grow up in these digital environments as natives, that they are in many ways better equipped to navigate than us well-meaning adults. But the fact that technology is being used to grow companies exponentially is a whole other problem. So Twitter at $2 billion a year, in my opinion, was a fine app. And someone invented, right? They invented Twitter, a 140 character messaging app. It got up to about $2 billion a year, and Wall Street called Twitter an abject failure, because it turned out that was about all you could make off a 140 character messaging app was $2 billion a year. So now Twitter had to pivot and figure out a way to make more money than that. And that's when things went awry. So what is the cause of our kids' ills? I mean, you could look at a movie like Social Dilemma, which is a movie about really the wizards of psychological manipulation through technology, realizing the error of their ways and deciding they're going to become the wizards of sense making, and how people get out of this. So they're blaming technology, and they're blaming, I understand there's a captology lab at Stanford University that I've often been, critical of. It's a place where they teach engineers how to port the algorithms from Las Vegas slot machines into social media feeds. And we can blame that ability, but they don't, in movies like that, and technologists who talk like this, they don't tend to blame capitalism itself, this need to make money and how it camouflages itself behind technological wizardry. So for me, the beauty of technology, the possibility here, is the original open source ethos of digital technology and the internet. I mean, it's so hard to imagine. And the reason why we were so utopian about the possibilities of digital technology is because it was utopian from the get-go. In order to use a computer, we only had what were called terminals, dumb terminals, and we had to share the central processor. We shared computing resources. Every piece of software that someone wrote was shareware. We gave it away because we wanted other people to use it. And there was a moment really when this open source ethos of technology was flipped. And I usually identify it as like 1993, 94, when Wired magazine came out. And Wired really recontextualized this digital, social, cultural, shareware, open source renaissance as a financial opportunity. They said we're in a long boom, and thanks to digital technology, the economy will be able to grow exponentially forever. The only limit on our growth is what they called eyeball hours. That was the metric they used for human attention. The number of eyeballs that the number of hours that someone's human eyeballs could stay glued to the screen. And from then on, they started to talk about making websites sticky and, holding on to people's attention. And I got really concerned for young people at that point, because it's like, wow, so now young people are on platforms that are being designed to entrap them in one way or another. And I remember when I wrote Playing the Future, I wrote about the rise of ADD, attention deficit disorder. The diagnoses of attention deficit disorder rose by about 4,000% in the 5 or 10 years following Wired magazine announcing that we're living in an attention economy. And the thing we're going to have to compete for is human attention. So what's really going on there is not technology being used to help people communicate and form friends. It's technology being used in order to attract human attention and maintain those eyeballs by whatever means necessary. So you get brilliant, wonderful young people, college freshmen, sitting in their dorms, coming up with great ideas for social networks or search engines. And these are people like the people who started Facebook and the people who started Google, and they come up with a great idea, but then a venture capitalist, an investor, comes to that college freshman and says, okay, you've got a great idea. Leave college. Don't take economics, don't take history, don't take ethics, don't take anthropology. Come and be the founder of a company. Here's a bunch of money. But what I want you to do is pivot. I want you to pivot away from your nice social idea that can make tens of millions of dollars for you and your investors, and instead pivot to this other idea about extracting data from people and manipulating human behavior so we can make billions of dollars instead. So what happens is we have these adult children, right? We have people who were not allowed to develop, who were not allowed to finish college. We have basically college dropouts who transfer parental authority onto venture capitalists, trying to make those folks money without realizing, no, your original dream, what you were going to do when you were 19, was way wiser and way smarter and way more pro-social than what you're now doing at 30, having kind of surrendered your ambition to the stock market. Meanwhile, I look at the young people, and I still believe that we are foolish as adults thinking that we are going to teach kids more about interactive media and social networks than they already know. Kids are learning programming and layering. Kids do understand memetics. As someone said before, kids can play the system. When I talk to kind of media literacy adults, of which I consider myself one of the concerned adults wanting to teach kids about the digital environment, They don't know what a vibe shift is. They don't know what vaporwave is as an aesthetic, or how vaporwave aesthetic is overlapped with alt-right memes in order to create a kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, subtle communication. I mean, there is an ideological war going on in social media and on social networks, but many of our kids understand this war better than we do. So we try to protect and ultimately disarm our kids, I would say, at their peril, because we paint the technology as the problem rather than the underlying economic model of the technologies, the ways that these technologies need to make money. And so what happens often is they say, okay, look at these social networks and technologies have created all these problems. Now we're going to develop new technologies, new decentralized blockchains, new social networks that are going to, and these are phrases I've heard, that are going to, upgrade human consciousness. We're going to upgrade kids' minds, as if the kids are going to be reprogrammed by better things. So people, and I get it, people who feel very guilty about making programs and platforms that have disabled human cognition now want to make technologies and platforms that are going to enable human cognition. But those folks still end up with a very tech-focused, techno-solutionist understanding of humans. And we see a lot of them. There's movements, and one of them is called the Great Reset, which is the World Economic Forum is trying to do the Great Reset. We're going to build a blockchain that's going to remake the economy. We hear things called, Game B and meta modernism, and all of these movements that are going to take, the same impulse to be a wizard or a sorcerer of media, and as a kind of a techno monarch, if you will, reset society, reboot, right? They're going to reboot, Control, Alt, Delete society with a better platform. And the only people who really believe those folks, the only people who take those folks at their word, are equally scary people, right? That's what, watch Steve Bannon's podcast called War Room Pandemic. Steve Bannon's a kind of an alt-right extremist, if you haven't heard of him. And listen to what the alt-right kind of more fascistic folks are talking about online. They're the people who are the most kind of gullible about what Peter Thiel or Elon Musk or the other would-be techno monarchs can do, right? They're the ones who believe, who take their proclamations at face value and then try to revolt against it. So, or they even, and we used the word cynical before, they even more cynically try to take the kids who understand technology, who understand memes, who are frustrated by what's going on, and corral them into a very cynical movement of kind of alt-right kids who use memetics and all of these platforms to do kind of awful things, to be very repressive to women and people of color, and to have these conversations that they think are healthy and open, but are actually very aggressive and hostile. But in some ways, what a guy like Steve Bannon wants to do by taking kids and saying, okay, make memes with me, make memes for Trump, make memes for the alt-right, they are closer to what a great dearly departed, recently friend of mine, DC Vito, used to do with high school kids in school. The way he taught media literacy with an organization called The Lamp was not to warn kids about all the dangerous stuff of social media and try to protect them, but rather give kids the tools they need to break the media and make media that they want to make. He had a tool called a Media Breaker, which allowed kids to take advertisements and re-edit them and put new narration under them in order to show, to reveal what the ads really meant, and then to take that media into a new, to make it say other things. So I've been arguing for that, really, as our approach toward media literacy, is giving kids the tools to actually make their own media. but to without telling them what to make or getting them to make destructive media. And the other thing I've been arguing is very similar to what Sherry Turkle talked about this morning, which is some return to the real ground. That if we're spending our time in spaces that are designed to intentionally decalibrate you, to make you uneasy, and they are, to make you uneasy so that you pay more attention and give more data, then you need to be able to return to real life, because this real life, not even on this beautiful interface, but in real life, looking in someone else's eyes is how you recalibrate your system. Boredom, which was said twice today, boredom is another way to recalibrate your nervous system. So when I look at kids going to schools today and how quickly our teachers hand an iPad to kids in class because, some metric of learning is increased when you use an interactive tool, what we're doing is losing the opportunity, one of the few opportunities we have left for real live engagement. It's when your feet are on the ground, when you're in real life, when you've been calibrated, and only then can you really recognize when someone is trying to challenge your critical thinking. But it's interesting. We've surrendered in high school, especially. We've surrendered what I think is the most important thing to learn, critical thinking in high school. We've surrendered it to job readiness, right? We want to teach kids STEM so they can get jobs in companies as soon as they graduate. But since when is public education an opportunity for corporations to externalize the cost of job training to the public sector? Right? No, public school is not about getting ready for a job. Public school is supposed to be learning how to think so that you can be a thinking a citizen with autonomy. And if we can't even use public school to do that, then how are we supposed to be able to turn kids into set them loose on the internet as young adults and have them able to think for themselves? So I've written a bunch of books on that too, on returning to the ground. I did one called Team Human, about how we have to respect human beings and not try to auto-tune everybody into kind of digital conformity, but instead promote the individual autonomy and agency of good, wonderful, weird humans. And even that language, the people I hear using that kind of human language are some of the scariest people out there. Those memes, those ideas have also been co-opted by far-right extremists. There's a woman, a far-right extremist who won became prime minister in Italy. And I listened to her speech and she was talking about, we are human beings. We're not numbers. We're not consumers. We're not going to be technologized. Yet she was also arguing for kind of white supremacist, what we would normally call a fascist or authoritarian agenda. So the opportunity, I think now, is to grow teenagers into thinking adults rather than these kind of adult-size, childish impulse machines like Zuckerberg or Musk. If you can watch Elon Musk's meltdown on Twitter, you see this is an adult child, right? That he hasn't developed the critical faculties. He's developed his impetuousness. So what I would prefer to do now is kind of give young people the tools of technology, give them the tools of critical thinking, which are universal, not specific to media. Literacy, yes, it's a way of reading, and it's a kind of media proficiency. But more importantly, we can't cede this space to corporations. What we do have to do, though, is accept that corporations have the home field advantage in interactive spaces. They do. They are not real. They are abstract. They are like spirits, right? A corporation is not a real thing. The only place it lives is in this abstract realm of media. So it's very hard to fight them effectively when we are immigrants to that space. Even if we're young, we do not live in social media. We live in the real ground. This is the place that we can defend. When we go into social media, I feel, or into interactive media, we have to understand that there are different levels of engagement. There are different levels of proficiency, and you can compare them to the levels of proficiency when you're playing a video game, right? You get a game out of the box and you play it as a player, right? You just go through this game following the rules and try to get as far in it as you can. What do you do when you get stuck in that game? Well, at least what we used to do is look in the magazines. Now you look online for what they call the cheat codes of the game, right? When you add in the cheat code, now you get infinite ammunition or better armor or more lives, right? So now you've gone from playing the game with the rules to having the choice to playing the game outside the rules. And then what do you do after you get, it really good and you've gotten through the whole game with all your infinite ammunition? Well, then you become what they call a modder, right? You can mod the game. You go online, you find out, now I'm going to take the levels of this game and I'm going to place them in a different environment, or I'm going to turn guns into swords or into magic wands. So now you're modding the original game. And then what do you do? If you get really good at modding games, you become a game programmer, right? Where you make up the rules of your own game and develop it. So I feel like we all move through these stages with media, from being players to being cheaters to being modders who think they're programmers to finally being programmers where you can actually create your own rules of the game. One more step than that, though, in the real world with digital media is looking at the underlying rules of your tech business. Right. So you can be a great programmer, but if you don't challenge the underlying business rules of programming, you're not really going to win that game. Right. If whatever company, whatever idea, whatever technology you come up with if the only thing you can think of to do with it is to go to a venture capitalist and get a bunch of money and sell your business to him, generally him, to sell your business to him and then have to exponentially grow your business forever, you've just taken your technology and surrendered it to something else, to a different underlying operating system. So in short, what I would say is, yes, if we are in a media digital simulacra, this simulation of digital media, so be it. The one advantage that we have in this space is to remember that it's a construction. It's what we call a social construction. And what we can help young people do, in particular, teenagers do, is see through this construction because they have such good grounding in real world engagement. If you don't have real world engagement, if you don't know what real eye contact is, then you can't recognize the constructed nature of this fake reality that we're playing in, so that then we can become conscious builders of these platforms rather than just players, right? Or cheaters. Right? Once we can understand the constructed nature of these spaces, the figures on the screen, then we can come to distinguish between these figures on the screen and the real ground in which people live.